Good morning, everybody. I'm Aron Cramer, the President and CEO of BSR, and I want to welcome you to the BSR Conference 2011. It's a real honor to open the conference, to have 1,000 of you from 37 countries from all parts of the world here with us this week. It is always great at the BSR Conference to see so many familiar faces and also see lots of new friends and new member companies at BSR and new partners. It is really an honor to bring all of you together. You know, our conference always seems to arrive at momentous times, and this year's conference is no different. According to the United Nations, on Monday, the 7 billionth human being arrived on planet Earth. And I think it is safe to say that, in fact, we hold the future of that baby in our hands. The world that we're creating is the world that that baby will inherit and live in. And not only that, but the 8 billionth baby coming sometime within the next 2 decades, and the 9 billionth baby coming by the middle of the century will be also inheriting the world that we create. So this week I hope that we will be able to do a lot of things, and one of them is to rededicate ourselves to creating a world where 7, 8, 9 billion people can live dignified, secure, and healthy lives. We know, I think, that businesses can help make that vision a reality. And we also know that those of us in the room right here can help our businesses turn in that direction. So we are living in consequential times. 2011 has been no ordinary year. I returned about 10 days ago from the Middle East, where I had the chance to hear a 27-year-old woman, a human rights activist from Tunisia, speaking the very day that she was being elected to the parliament in Tunisia, the first truly free elections that her country had experienced in quite some time. Met social entrepreneurs from Egypt who were trying to take advantage of the spirit of Tahrir Square to build civil society in that country, which has a proud history and a less than perfect recent past. And I heard from Libyan leaders who were talking about how they intended to translate Libya's newfound freedoms into a more vibrant, a more fair, a more prosperous country for their comrades. And it was truly inspiring, I have to say, to share in the joy, and there really is no other word for it, the joy that all of these people felt, as well as their vision. So in 2011, we've seen a lot of change, and there are many reasons to be optimistic. But I think it's also fair to say that 2011 has been marked by some anxiety, some frustration, and in some cases downright anger. We see the Occupy movement, and whatever you might think of some of the individuals in the tents and along Market Street, the people in tents sleeping just on the other side of the hotel, I think that their presence and their presence around the world, the movement also started with the Indignados in Spain, and we saw many people out on the streets in India. There are a lot of people who feel that the economy, no matter where in the world they are, isn't working for them. And we've seen statistical proof of this as well. In the United States, we learned last week that over the last 3 decades, the top 1% has had their income increase by 275% over the last 3 decades. Now that in itself is not a problem. The problem is that the middle class has seen its income rise by 1/6 of that amount. So there's very disproportionate economic progress being made. At the same time, faith in governments is extremely low. You know, polling data show that about 9% of Americans think that Congress is doing a good job, and the only mystery to me is who these 9% are. I don't tend to meet many of them. Europe is another story altogether. European leaders are struggling. If in Washington it sometimes seems that there's an argument about whether to drive north or south, in Europe it sometimes seems that there are 27 people grasping for the steering wheel, and that's not a safe way to drive. When we met 2 years ago here in San Francisco, I think a lot of us had great hopes that Copenhagen would deliver an outcome that would put us on a path, a clear path, towards more sustainable economic development, and we know what happened in Copenhagen. And of course, our environmental problems also continue to grow. They're quite complicated. The Rubik's Cube question of figuring out food, fuel, and water is something that's on many of our minds. I won't say a lot about climate. There's a speaker following me who knows a little something about that, and I think I'll leave to him maybe that topic. So there are a lot of, we're dealing with a lot of complex issues, but you know, BSR has never been about gloom and doom, never in our history. And as we enter our 20th year, which we'll celebrate in 2012, it's really clearer to me and to all of us that businesses that are sustainable, innovative, and inclusive are going to be the key to leading us out of what appears to be the great stagnation, an extended period of very poor economic growth. So we tackle this challenge with a lot of new dynamics. A lot of the conditions that have shaped our work over the last 20 years are no longer the dominant themes that we're facing today. Talked about economic stagnation, and in addition to an expectation of very poor economic performance for an extended period, this is bringing along a lack of confidence and a lack of a faith in the future that is really crucial, since sustainability is all about building an economy that will work over the long run. Our world today, of course, is hyper-connected, extremely transparent, and as we've seen this year, change comes more and more from the bottom up, not from the top down. And we live in a world that, because change happens so quickly, the most powerful institutions that we see today are not necessarily institutions that are going to be with us forever, or even for the short or medium term. And I think if you take all of this together and you take the challenges that are being faced in the West, in America, in Europe, in Japan, what's really interesting to me is that in some ways, for the first time since BSR got started, the world of corporate responsibility is being shaped as much by conditions in the developed economies as it is based on the impacts that occur in developing economies. Now that, of course, remains very important, but I think we're in a transitional period where what's happening here in the West, as we call it, or in the North, is becoming to define a lot of the challenges and I think ultimately a lot of the answers as well. So in this change context, I'd like to say that there are 4 key pillars of sustainability that, in our view, are particularly important now and are going to be particularly important in the years ahead. First, business needs to think about solutions and create solutions that provide economic opportunity for all. You know, Occupy Wall Street may end up being remembered, however it plays out, as being to this decade what the battle for Seattle at the WTO meeting in 1999 was to the last decade. A wake-up call that causes a lot of us to see the world differently than we did before. So we need to focus on building a fair and an inclusive economy, including here at home. If that doesn't happen, then trust in business will decline, and license to operate will also decline, and policy answers may emerge that business is not all that happy about. Focusing on people's welfare at home, in America, in Europe, in Japan, is not something that's been a core part of our agenda in recent years, and I think that needs to change. Secondly, we really need to declare a war on waste. You know, during prosperous times when we waste 1/3 of our food, 1/3 of our energy, as Americans do, it's morally dubious, it's environmentally insensitive, but in difficult economic times it's just foolish. It's economic suicide. And so that may be one way that a stagnant economy actually creates a new opportunity. Because it may be that a war on waste is something that helps us make sustainability relevant for each and every household and each and every consumer. It may be an opportunity, I think it is, to turn sustainable consumption from an abstract concept to something that helps drive and enable companies to create new products, new business models, new partnerships that help all of us unlock savings in terms of how we use food and energy, transportation and water. Third, we need to help push policymakers, they need our help, to stay focused on reforms that enable more long-term thinking. In an environment where we're really quite frustrated with public officials, it's essential that business finds a constructive public voice. And business, for example, needs to make sure that climate change stays on the world's agenda. With Rio+20 looming next June, and a lot of governments distracted by economic difficulties, an election in the United States, a leadership transition in China, business has to make the case that we have to stay as focused on dealing with climate change and building sustainable development than ever before. And to support that goal, it's also important that business continue to think about ways to redefine how we think about fiduciary responsibility. Because the rules as they are now make it very difficult for boards, for CEOs, for line managers to make long-term investments and be rewarded in public markets. So the rules really need to change. Finally, let's remember what business does best. Business innovates, that's when business succeeds. And despite the anxious headlines that we see every day, in fact, we're living in a golden era of innovation. It's happening down the road in Silicon Valley. It's happening in remote villages in Africa where mobile technologies are enabling people to build small enterprises and get a better return for their agricultural crops. And it's happening as companies think about new business models that deliver a lot more value with a lot less stuff. And so now more than ever, it's essential that the sustainability function be an innovation lab. We have to think of ourselves as architects of a new world, not cost centers that protect reputation. I want to take a couple of minutes also to close, or to talk about the theme of this year's conference, Redefining Leadership. And we chose this theme because we see the characteristics of leadership changing in some pretty fundamental ways. Traditionally, leaders have demonstrated their prowess by separating themselves from others. The challenge of our time is to lead by bringing others along with us. Traditionally, leaders had a monopoly on information and could rely on that to protect their position as leaders. But today, the challenge is different. Leaders need to elicit insights from information, make sense of the world for people, and to do that with information that comes from a lot of new and very often unfamiliar sources. Traditionally, leaders focused only on building their own institutions to being the best that they can be. But today's leaders understand that, that making their own institutions strong depends also on building partnerships that can amplify the progress that any single institution can make. There are lots of other ways that leadership is changing. I hope you'll explore that over the coming days. And in fact, I'd like us to make a deal. And I would love for all of you to go out and explore the theme of leadership. In every session you're in, every conversation you're in, really explore that idea. Take back some new ideas that you can use. Think about how you can lead differently, because in today's world, the one thing that is undeniably true is there's actually 7 billion leaders out there in the world, and it depends on all of us to be the best leaders we can be to build the world that we want to see. And it's important because if you look around today, again, a lot of the institutions that exist don't necessarily seem up to the challenge. Government often seems better able to divide the slices of a shrinking pie than to expand opportunity. The Occupy movement may be a lot better at channeling anger than it is at delivering solutions. And consumers who are nervous about keeping their jobs are going to be a lot more focused on getting from paycheck to paycheck than they are about long-term solutions. So I think that with all that in mind, building the sustainable, innovative, inclusive economy that we all want to see really depends on us. And this is the vision that I'd like us to carry out of the next 3 days. Because as I said at the start, we hold in our hands the ability to create the kind of world that 7 billionth baby can happily inherit and live in and thrive in and sustain himself or herself in. Before I invite Al Gore to the stage, I also want to take a couple of moments to thank the people who make this great event possible. First, we have a marvelous team at BSR, 110 strong, from our 7 offices, including a new office in Sao Paulo, Brazil, that we're very excited about. They work hard to put this event together. They work hard also the other 359, or my math's not very good, 361 days of the year. We're here, we hope, every day to make your sustainability journey much smoother and much stronger. I also want to thank our sponsors for their support of this great event. It's absolutely essential, and I want to offer in particular my thanks to our convening sponsor, Enablon, and also congratulate them on the launch of their new sustainability platform, which has allowed, I think by most recent count, 100,000 enterprises to connect, and you'll have the chance to check it out. A model is available out in the foyer. So thank you very much to Enablon. But ultimately, I want to thank all of you. We're here because of our network of 300 member companies, our partners in the NGO world, in government. I've said a lot of mean things about government. I should also say some nice things about government. And in the academic world, BSR exists as part of an ecosystem, and we want to make that ecosystem stronger, and we want to take our own medicine, if you will, and be the kinds of collaborative leaders that we're encouraging all of you to be. So we really depend on you. We're here to support you, and we're delighted to share these next 3 days with you.